All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Acceptable Accuracy with Tyler and Philip. I am one of your co-hosts, Tyler.
And I am the other co-host, Philip. Or Felipe. Philippines. Or just Phil.
Fun fact.
Whatever you're feeling.
Fun fact, and speaking of the Philippines, inside the Filipino language, there is no F sound. So they named it after King Philip, who conquered the Philippines. And so that's why if you talk to a lot of Filipinos, they say Philippines, the Philippines, because they don't have
the
F
history of the Philippines, featuring Tyler.
It's true. Hey, JJ Rakaza, he's Filipino. The Filipinos, man, they're fast, they're accurate, they're good. They're like Mojo, man. I don't even know what Mojo is. But all I know is I'm Asian Mojo.
If you're Asian Mojo, I'm Ray Ray Jacuzzi.
That's amazing.
Tyler, I feel like we should probably introduce our guests today.
I probably think so too. So we have Ray Ray, whatever his name is, right there.
Ray Ray Jacuzzi.
So, of course, once again, for those who don't know, Phil and I are both USPSA shooters. We both enjoy that type of competition style shooting. And today, with our guests, we have two of our buddies who we actually do competition shooting with. So we have two of our buddies, Paul and Tom. Why don't you guys go and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Paul. I shoot USPSA all the time with Phil and Tyler. It's a great time. Currently B class shooter. Hopefully hoping to climb up this next season here to A or M. But yeah.
What division do you shoot, Paul?
I shoot limited optics and carry optics.
Okay.
With your platypus.
Yep, I have a platypus for limited optics, and I was shooting a Langdon 92 for carry optics for a long time.
I don't want to get into this, but I actually did not realize that Langdon. Okay, now I just to get into it, and we're not even going to get a chance to introduce Tom. But I didn't realize that Langdon had such impact on the Beretta culture. Because I don't shoot a Beretta, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's because no red dot for the longest time. Bad triggers, bad magazines. No one really wanted to deal with it.
And I didn't realize that Langdon actually has a patent on the way that he mills the Berettas in order to take a optic on the top of it. As such, Beretta cannot copy that, which I thought was
crazy.
Anyway, real quick, I'm gonna let Tom introduce himself here. So first time with us. So Paul's a repeat, and first time with us is Tom. So Tom, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then kind of go over the divisions that you've shot recently, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, I'm Tom. This will be my fourth year shooting USPSA. Been shooting limited for the first 3 years, and now I'm switching to carry optics.
Nice. I get this feeling that there's going to be nobody left in the non-optics divisions, because there are we got technically 4 optics divisions now with actually 5, because actually hang on. I feel bad. I feel like I should know this because it's such a dead division. Does revolver? Are you allowed to shoot an optic in revolver, or is it?
I don't think in USPSA you can.
There was a membership vote on it maybe a couple months ago. I mean, I voted yes on it because
there was a vote.
Yeah, I have very squinty eyes, and so dots are great for me.
Oh my
gosh. And I've always wanted to shoot Brent's revolver, with a dot on it. Because reloading revolvers looks really cool. It's Instagram worthy.
I feel like if you're going to shoot revolver, though, you should be required to wear a cowboy hat and chaps. Just saying.
I can borrow a cowboy hat or buy one. I don't care.
And bring a horse.
That's a little harder. You might have to kick me up for a horse.
What about you could do a hobby horse?
That was literally what I was thinking. Just be a hobby horse, man.
Yeah.
At first, I thought that was a total joke. And then I looked and I was like, dude, they are serious about that stuff. That's wild to me. Phil, we should enter a hobby horse competition.
I'm down with that. Can I get a Clydesdale hobby horse, though? Given my height, I'm going to need one. Just saying.
What about that pig one where you have the stick, you hit the pig, and you just stare at the judge the whole time? You just ignore the pig. You know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh man, that's such a random niche thing.
This sounds like an internet deep hole that you went down one time.
It's like a big
It really
thing.
is.
Isn't it like a big thing at like farmers conventions and like all those
County fairs and stuff.
county fairs? Yeah, there you
Kind of
go.
The
is.
4-H. I feel
Yeah.
okay. So just we're like what 5 minutes in, and we have talked about the Philippines. We've talked
Yep.
about hobby farms,
Yep.
horses,
And
We
pigs.
have not talked about our topic today.
Yes, we did. We talked
so-
about USPSA.
That is true. Our topic today is USPSA, and specifically because we're about to get into USPSA season. At the time of recording this, it's still very much the frozen north in Michigan, but by the time it will be out, we'll hopefully have thawed a little bit, and USPSA season will be a thought in our brains of like.
Bro, it's
getting
going to be
ready for
single
spring.
digits for the next 2 weeks. I don't know what you're talking about.
I will be down in North Carolina next week, so I will be
And
in the warmish area.
well, I can't say
But,
much because I'm going to be north in Houghton Lake for a weekend. And then I go to the other side of the country to visit the motherland.
Motherland, is that like the USPSA motherland?
Nam.
Is that Russia?
Yeah, I'm going to Vietnam.
I
It's
know
gonna
where
be
you're
great.
going.
I know. I'm going to I'm going to see the whole country. It's going to be great. I'm going to go Saigon, Hanoi, and Da Nang. It's going to be great.
Yeah, he's gonna see where all the trees talked.
Wait, what?
Where all the trees talked, bro.
Where all the trees talked?
Yeah, dude.
What
If
do you
the
mean
trees
by
start
that?
if the trees start talking, just bring your flamethrower. Just burn it down.
Oh God.
All right. Drop my napalm.
Wow. I feel like there's like a Vietnam War thing here going on, like people hiding in trees or something.
I
Yes.
guess. I figured that's what he meant after.
That's actually kind of old as time too. They did it in World War I a little bit as well. They would like,
Interesting.
put up fake hollowed out trees so they could like view the battlefield. Anyway, so we're going to chat about USPSA a little bit today, and specifically rules in USPSA that we think should change. Because again, they do a decent job of changing stuff. They'll add new divisions periodically, especially I feel like over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of new divisions, modifications to divisions. So it's an ever changing sport, right? And I think a lot of that changes around the technology within firearms, right? Which is very much driven by USPSA and other action sports as well. So with that, the rules do change, but sometimes there are rules that just kind of hang out there that they need to go, right? There's a little bit of that kind of like FUD lore out there, which again,
Less FUD, more fun.
Yes, we're gonna get into some of this controversial stuff, and
That's an inside joke.
Talk about it is an inside joke. You like how I just kind of grazed past it because I didn't want to get into it and like piss anybody off. So
I don't even care.
I don't even care.
I do what I like, man. Because for those who don't know, like, yes, we are going to be talking about the rules of USPSA, but I feel like I'm kind of being a dummy right now because for the other three who are listening, they know this. I pretty much don't know any of the rules of USPSA. I just know like the absolute bare fundamentals and basics, and that's about it. I'm like, so Phil messaged us 15 minutes before recording and said, homework for you guys. Name a rule of USPSA that you think is dumb. And I'm sitting there like, bro, why are you asking me this 15 minutes prior?
Okay, to be
That's
fair,
not even homework.
people do their best work under pressure.
Quiz. That is not homework. That's pop quiz.
Next time I will text you and say pop quiz. Hang on, I'm going to do it right now.
Oh, great. Okay. But all that to say, my rule was thigh straps, but they're allowed now. That's been allowed for like a year. So that's all I got. Sorry.
So real quick on your comment about not knowing the rules. Literally, when we show up at USPSA, we just like have Tyler go to the safety area, puts his gun on, loads up his mags, and then we put him in front of the stage, spin him around a few times, and then say go.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Yes, 100%. And somehow I'm still a B-class shooter.
And you're faster than I am, so I can't talk.
It's because shooting all the new classifiers takes a lot of cardboard because they just get shot out. So we have to do stand and deliver ones, which is really easy, which is like Tyler's forte.
That is very true.
Like, can you count?
I was very happy with that. I think I got an A on that one. That's how I have a B class. B class.
So I guess
now,
that's actually a great
whatever.
controversy with USPSA is that a lot of the qualifiers are shot out. And Paul, do you mind explaining what you mean by shot out?
Yeah. So when we talk about some of these classifiers, when someone references that specifically, pretty much all of the really the older classifiers that have been well established and have been around for a good number of years we've all kind of hit the peak of about where of how well that classifier can get shot. So can you count is one of those. It's if you don't know what it is, it's 2 strings, 2 targets essentially, and it's five on one target, reloaded 5 on the other target. And as over the years, as shooters have gotten a lot better, and people are just crazy good nowadays. Shoot it over and over and over and over and over again. Obviously, the scores will rise, and so we've kind of hit that peak of where what a classifier can be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that you see is you get people who will. It's like those kind of things are easy to set up, right? So they're repeatable at the range, and you can set it up, and you can just shoot it over and over again. And I think like when you do that, and you shoot just for the stage, just to increase your your classification level. I think it's called grand bagger, where you're basically punching above the weight that you should be in, right? Just because you've practiced this one thing over and over again.
I will say I don't. So I guess what I was saying was that some of these new classifiers, I think they're really great. The only issue with them is that sometimes whoever had designed them didn't do the math right, which is kind of really annoying. So some of them, when you run it, you are placing about 5 to 10% higher than you actually should be in terms of a classification score, which I don't understand how you do the math wrong on that. It boggles my mind.
Because when they've set these classifiers, don't they like set it up and then usually they'll drop it at? I know in the past they've dropped them at like national matches or whatever, and then based on like when a JJ Ricazzo shows up and depending on how fast he shoots it, because he's a GM and a high level GM, that's kind of like your top bar. And don't they try to figure out the percentages below that?
Yeah, and I think there's even there's a formula somewhere out there that you can use to just figure out about where the high hit factor should be. But yeah, like some of them, there was a classifier that we did last year or the year before that I scored a high A class, no, a high M class, not high, but an M class run.
Wow.
But it was actually yeah, that was probably more like an A class run. As I was talking to some guys about it that were huge classifier nerds.
I remember when I was first shooting the action shooting sports, if you can call it this controversial take, Steel Challenge is fast, but not necessarily an action sport. Because there's only one stage of movement. But I remember it was like when they added PCC both to USPSA and to Steel Challenge, every year, like I kept getting closer and closer to being A class, and then they would like change the qualifications to make it harder and harder and harder. And finally, I was able to breach that. But they kept adding reducing the time in order to get there, because I think they realized that people were figuring these things out, right? And they would find ways to cut corners, or like the equipment would get to the point where it was just so fast, or it was so like PCC being so new, nobody really knew how to peg it, right? Because you try and maybe get near open, but with like Steel Challenge, there's no like power factor. So your open times are going to be slower typically than a PCC time, and I guess you could kind of peg it to like a rimfire time, but even then it's going to be slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough. It's not an easy way of setting scores.
So I guess as you speak of that, before we go any further, I guess for those who don't know, can one of you guys explain what power factor or hit factor even means?
That sounds like a Paul job.
Oh, okay.
All right, Paul, go for it.
I do hit factor, and Tom does power factor.
Sure,
what's
why
the
not?
difference? Is there a difference? Oh, there is a difference.
There is a difference. Hit factor is
See? USPSA noob right here. Somehow a B class.
Well, you don't have to completely understand how hit factor works to do well, but hit factor is I believe it's time, or it's points over time.
Okay.
And so that's how they score. That's how they score each stage. Or when you go up and you go through and you do your run. So let's say it's a 50-point stage. So I don't know how many targets that is off the top of my head. So 10 targets. Yeah. So 50 points, 10 targets. And then however fast you run that. So you take the 50 points. Let's say you get all alphas. So all 50 points, divide that by your time, and then multiply by 100 to get a nice round number is your hit factor. And generally your hit factor is the higher the hit factor, the better you did.
Mhm.
But hit factor is an ever-changing thing, and it is dependent on the stage itself, and not necessarily. There's not necessarily a ceiling that you're looking for, because that's an ever-changing thing. So typically, the shorter a stage, the higher the hit factor. The longer the stage, the lower the hit factor.
I didn't know that.
Because when you're running and not shooting, you're not going to get points. So the bigger stages where there's lots of movement, you're going to have a lower hit factor.
That makes sense.
And it's okay because like you're pegged against everybody else that has to deal within that stage, right? So
Yep.
per Paul's comment earlier, like the hit factor is going to change from stage to stage. And again, you're going to have some stages that are going to be like hit factor of like 10, because they're super fast stages. But then you're going to have other stages again that you're moving. Like I think a lot of the stages in our desert at South Kent, those tend to be, because a lot more movement. Those tend to be lower hit factor as a result.
The only thing I wish was, I wish it was easier to figure out what hit factor a stage is, because I find that it seems like most higher level shooters can generally figure out what the high hit factor for a stage is. They can look, they do their walkthrough, they'll look at each target positions, all that stuff, and they'll be like, oh yeah, this is probably about a 15 hit factor, so we should really be aiming for X amount of seconds to run the stage. That's something I haven't quite figured out yet. I've had somebody look at videos for me before, and they were able to explain it, but it seems to be a thing that I just haven't been able to wrap my head around.
I'm sure somebody could look at a stage and be like, hey, this is the amount of like steps you need to take from target to target. Take those steps based on like the target placement, the target complexity. Like, is there a no shoot in front of it? How far away is the target? Those kind of things. You could probably come up with a rough number. Actually, it's funny because I've been doing that with Kyle a little bit, who's been on the podcast before, where we'll kind of like guess at what like a hit factor will be. I actually will guess at people's hit factors as well too. I've gotten pretty good. I can predict most people on our squad's hit factors based on like the first person that runs the stage. Though I still have a challenge like getting like an accurate hit factor count. I'll usually be off by a couple points typically.
Yeah.
So we have hit factor. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, and I mean, when people like talk about, or when people like go through a stage and like determine hit factor, they are determining high hit factor, so it's 100% of the stage. So I think so if you were to run the stage perfectly with no points down in the fastest time, there's a theoretical 100% that you're aiming for. That it seems like most high level shooters can do, or can figure out at least the math behind that.
I feel like they would have to as well, because it's like people that are shooting at a super high level who are shooting for a living would have to know like how they're going to go through the stage, obviously with stage prep and setup, but then they're also they don't necessarily know unless you're using electronic scoring that's updated frequently, you wouldn't know what everybody else is shooting at, right? So like how much do you need to like really put the gas down, or how much can you let up based on certain shot difficulty in order to make the correct hit factor so that you can be competitive.
I find, what was it? I mean, maybe this is a whole different like episode, or just a side conversation that we should have, but between us and the group. But I find that while currently the best shooters out there are extremely, how do I put this, like have a very controlled mindset in terms of they basically will go out and they'll have a very, what's the word I'm thinking of, a very focused and mental process of speed. It's probably, yeah, that's the way to put it. Like the controlled idea of speed. So they'll be like, I think like JJ Rakaza, he's mentioned it before. He talks about like controlled targets versus aggressive targets. I think that's the wrong verbiage, but something like that, where he's like goes through, he's like, okay, so that's a controlled target because I need to do this, and this, and then this is an aggressive target because I can do this. This allows me to get away with this, and this, whatever, blah blah blah. And I think even Eric Graffel, who, if you don't know the IPSC space, he's like the multi-time world champion in production, which is the largest division in IPSC worldwide.
Still,
I think so. Yeah.
dang.
Yeah.
It's because optics are expensive, and all the Europeans are paying their money in taxes. They can't afford them.
Yeah, and then I think it's like, and then obviously it's like more money to. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's crazy.
But then there's also money to like get slides milled and stuff like that may or may not exist. So yeah, production is the biggest division as far as I understand. Those two guys have a very similar approach, I think, from what it seems like, and they're very controlled. But it seems like for most people to get to a really, really high level, and I'm going to drop names like Joey Sauerland, for example, and oh god, what's the other guy's name? But anyway, like guys like him, they don't have like this mindset of controlling speed and how fast they shoot or how slow they shoot. And I found that for me, if I try to control like how fast or how slow I shoot, I'll just tank a whole match if I do that.
So you just turn up to 11 the whole time is what I'm hearing.
I just submit to my sights. Nice. and don't shoot on one sight picture, because that's also problems.
So I guess on the here's a controversial take on the hit factor scoring debate itself, right? There are a lot of people that would argue that hit factor favors speed over accuracy.
Hi.
Exactly. With Tyler being a very fast shooter, right? And I think that's okay because USPSA, so maybe it's not as controversial as maybe I was thinking it was going to be, but USPSA,
I like it.
USPSA is one of those more flashy, quick, how fast can you float through a stage type of thing, right? Whereas an IDPA definitely is
slice that pie,
more,
bro.
Yep, is weighted more towards accuracy, right? Because if you get points down, that's really going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess which leads into the conversation of power factor, which Thomas, if you want to go ahead and cover what is power factor, and then I want to kind of talk about why I think power factor shouldn't exist anymore.
Well, I agree with you. I don't think it should exist, but power factor is they take basically you need a chronograph to figure it out, but they take your bullet weight and your speed the bullet's going, and they feed it into a equation that pops out a power factor. And I can't remember off the top of my head what the numbers are, but to be a minor power factor, you have to be above a certain number and in between certain numbers, and to be a major power factor, you need to be above a higher number. And it basically gives an advantage in scoring to the major power factor. You get more points for a C zone hit and a D zone hit than you would if you were a minor power factor.
So then along that lines of your take on why we shouldn't, and I think we're going to agree on this one, but why do you think we should get rid of the power factor? Why do you think it's maybe antiquated?
I mean, I started shooting limited using a 9mm, so I was minor already, and some guys still shoot 40, but you don't see, at least I don't see at South Kent that many people shooting 40. It's mostly been 9mm, double stack 2011s. But then when limited optics became a division, that kind of took all those away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like when you add a division like limited optics, which is limited to minor power factor only, you are going to take away from open at that point, because they introduced hammer fired guns into limited optics, right? Because you couldn't shoot a hammer fired gun in carry optics.
You couldn't shoot a single action only gun in carry.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. You are correct. I apologize, because I was thinking of the shadows. Those are double singles. So yeah, you are correct. So single action.
No idea.
Think my Bretta versus my platypus. I had to do a double action pull the first shot, so I pulled that first trigger is pulling the hammer back and then releasing it.
Mhm.
And then every subsequent shot after that, the slide basically resets that hammer to single to cocked, and then so every shot after that is just single, where the trigger is only just releasing the hammer.
So the disadvantage with that, but you could still use that in divisions like carry optics or production. The disadvantage was always because you had to deal with the double action trigger pull at the beginning, and then you get the advantage of the single straight after that, right?
Yeah.
But with the introduction of like single action only, which are typically like 1911s, right, or 2011s.
My shadow is a single action only.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
See, I don't know CZs as well as I probably should.
Shadow 2s are interesting. They have a number of variations, but they do make an SA a single action only model,
which is the one that I have.
Yeah.
So then you have like the striker fire debate, which is striker fire is typically the triggers are not going to be as good as like a single action trigger or even like a double single, right? So I guess my kind of take on power factor and why it should go away personally, you've got, because again, you have like major power factor and minor power factor. Major is typically for shooting 40, 45, or like 38 super or 9 major, for example, right? A lot of those, they're very expensive to shoot. 40, 45, not as bad, but if you want to be competitive and open, you're shooting 38 super or 9 major, right? And with today, with the way that everything has gone, 9mm hands down is king, right? And just about every handgun you're going to get, 9mm is going to be the option that people are going to go to first, right? And they use it because they're like, well, it's open, uses major power factor, though you can shoot it in minor, and don't be poor, right? It's always been kind of the argument there. But like, I don't really understand why even bother having the two different. Like, I think that having a minimum level is important because otherwise you get people powder puff loads, right?
Yeah.
But why even bother having like major power factor when you've got divisions like carry optics and limited optics, which I guess maybe is an argument against it because those divisions shoot 9mm in. But you get better scoring as a result of shooting in power factors. So instead of like A, C, D zones being, what is it? Major is what, 5, 4, and 2. Is that right? And then minor is 5, 3, and 1, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think limited optics was created because people wanted to shoot minor guns as open.
If you want to get into that, we can.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so this is throwing shade at the organization, but it's not the first time that's been done. Limited optics was a division made because I forgot his name on the board, but everybody that is like loves the USPSA political tea knows their name. But there was a guy on the board that was basically like, I'm getting a bunch of free staccatos, or I'm getting staccatos for cheap, or whatever. He's like, and I want to shoot my staccato, but I don't want to shoot it in open because I want a dot, but I don't want to shoot because I don't. So I'm not going to shoot it in limited. But I want a dot, and I want all the fun stuff. But I'm not going to. I can't shoot in carry optics. So we're going to make limited optics, which is by far I think one or the other should exist, and everything should be folded into it. If everybody, it will be completely dependent on what this year looks like. But if limited optics overtakes carry optics this year, in all reality, what they should have done was taken carry optics, added single action only guns in, and added the magwell. Boom, you're done.
I like that.
Do you know how many? Do you know how many? Like, I don't even see that many people with because the other things a part of the limited optics is like, so the magwell, single action only, and you're allowed to have slide rackers and you're allowed to have thumb rests. The amount of people I see that run a slide racker on a limited optics gun is like nil.
Zero.
Like, I don't see anybody run a slide racker on any limited optics gun, whether that was through pictures that USPSA's posted, whether that's through like other manufacturers like Masterpiece Arms, right? I almost never see anybody with a slide racker. The only limited optics gun I've seen with slide rackers is the Limcat guns, but those are like $7,000. So it's like, I'm not touching that unless I'm getting it for free.
And like the only reason they had the slide rackers in the first place was because of the guys that were shooting in open that had the huge optic attached to the side of the frame that went over top of the slide that made it hard to run,
Yeah, and that's fine,
right,
right?
exactly. Like,
And like,
there's a reason for that, right?
yeah,
So
and thumb rests are nice. I think what's funny is I think what ends up happening for most shooters that get really good is that the slide racker is a point of reference to put your hand rather than actually like applying any pressure to it. It seems to be the general consensus as shooters are getting better, or as a shooter gets better. You're not really applying any kind of torque onto it, and it's fine. Like I found that if I do everything right, it doesn't matter if I have a thumb rest or not. And I just think the slide racker is and makes no sense to me. I don't think it really saves you any time at least on a limited optics gun.
The problem that you're running into now with USPSA is you have like division sprawl, right? Like, how many divisions are we up to now? 11, 10 or 11 or something like that. Maybe it's not that high yet, but you have all these divisions, and I think that if you go to just minor power factor, you could collapse a lot of those divisions into like a reduced number of divisions right now. Because the issue you're running into is a lot of the iron sight divisions aren't being shot anymore. Like production, like there were some changes to production. They added 5 more rounds to the magazine, which I think was a good call, right? Like, who buys a production gun now that has anything less than 15 rounds in the magazine? Like, you buy carry guns. Most of your carry guns are going to have, 15 rounds in it nowadays, right? The double stack, like like Wonder 9 2.0s. But then, like, so I think you roll limited in production into one division. You go down to minor in that case, right? You roll carry optics and limited optics into a division. You can leave open if you want. I don't know. Maybe you can even get rid of that potentially as well too. PCC, like, whatever. I shot PCC in the past, but it's weird shooting a rifle in a pistol sport. And then revolvers, like, I don't know. I don't know what you do with a revolver. Like, maybe allow an optics on them and then keep them as a separate division.
Well, I think if you really want to take it down, it comes down to the question of do the majority of people want a magwell? If that's the case, right? Because we all know most people want to shoot dots. If most people want a magwell, okay, everything gets rolled into limited optics for the minor divisions. Boom, done. Keep open. We can keep open the way it is. I think it's a very interesting division. It's a lot of flash. I think it's a very I like looking at open guns. I'll never own one probably, but then again, I never said I'd drop the money for a 2011, but then I did. Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I'm very easily peer pressured, sadly. The open, I think open is a great division in terms of like it's the peak of pistol performance in terms of like mechanically, and then
it's like the F1 of pistol shooting.
Yeah, it's fun, right? Like it's something different and it's fun. And then in terms of well, maybe we can get back to I'll get back to revolver, but and then every other thing can be limited for non dot shooters. What's the harm in that? The only issue that you run into is the people that compete in states that have a limited magazine capacity. And that I mean, we could definitely have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I think in that case, if having states that are limited, they're limited in any division anyway. You just say, okay, well, you're only going to be competing against people with 10 rounds in their gun anyway. So you just have all the divisions, but then it's limited to 10 rounds, so you're fine.
Mm. But then it's a question of, those same people, these are also people that could, theoretically compete in area matches, and it wouldn't be fair to them. I guess it'd be the question of what is that participation level like?
Well, yeah, you've got all of California, right? Which technically they have like Freedom Week. They have like Freedom Week, right? So there are a bunch of mags out there now, and it's hard to like say who got their mags on Freedom Week and who didn't, blah blah blah. But interesting. So I guess Tom, I know we kind of like you kind of brought it up. Like, what would you kind of see your like changes if you had a magic wand from a division's perspective for USPSA and the limiting power factor? Like, what would you do? Like, what would you get down to? Like, what divisions would you have left over?
I do agree that like carry optics and limited optics can be kind of melded together. Like, is there an advantage of a single action only trigger? Yeah, they're light, they're crisp. but there isn't really an advantage. I don't notice the difference between. I mean, I notice a difference between my shadow and the Walther that I'm shooting, but it's not the trigger. It's just the gun. The Walther's lighter, where the shadow's heavier, and that's really the only difference I see or feel. But I think those two can be combined. Um, Limited and production could probably be combined. Just take away the 15 round like limit, and the people that have to shoot 10 can shoot 10. And I don't know about revolver. Revolver's kind of the oddball of the USPSA divisions, but open can stay the same. That's kind of where I'm sitting.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I guess the question I had for Tyler as well too was, Tyler is very much focused on like the concealed carry, defensive pistol kind of thing. And Tyler, I know that you've talked a little bit about and shot a bunch of people's firearms and pistols now, like including one that I own that has like a built-in like compensator into the barrel now and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
And with open, that's like the only division other than I guess PCC, right? That and maybe revolver that you're allowed to have a compensator, and even I think maybe revolver you can't either.
Revolver, you
But,
can't.
so Tyler, what kind of like carry optics to you? You've shot before, and then limited optics. There's a lot of technology changes between then and now. So what would you change personally with like a carry optics or limited optics?
You're asking the wrong guy, man. I will admit, I guess this is where my ignorance comes in because, I mean, you said it yourself. My focus is very much the more concealed carry side of things. And you even look at, I talk about it all the time, the main reason why I got into USPSA is because I was peer pressured into it by a buddy of mine
Right.
that I go to church with.
A
So
lot of that going around.
I know, right? That's true. Funny enough, we're getting more and more guys, which is funny. But all jokes aside, like, yeah, I mean, you convinced me to do USPSA with you, and I really enjoyed it. But my big thing was I basically my gun that I use for USPSA is my carry gun, is my tactical adventure race gun, my pretty much my gun that I shoot 99% of the time. So for me, my big thing is I just want to be able to whatever gun that I choose to carry or use the majority of the time, I just want to be able to just use it. Like, is it cool to be able to place like what I'd like to be an A class or M class shooter? Like, yeah, that'd be cool. But my thing is, I just want to see like, am I how's my training doing and how much carryover does it go? Like, I know you and we went to the range this morning, and like I know in our group chat or in our chat we said we're going for USPSA shooting, but which is true is what we're doing. Granted, we also had like 6 inches of snow on the ground, but we did draws, sight acquisition, target transitions, shoot for speed, shoot at distance, and one-handed shooting. So, in my opinion, that's just all fundamentals. So, all that to say, I don't really care.
Would you? Well, I guess the real question is: would you like to see a division that is solely focused on carrying, like concealed carry?
I mean,
'Cause
I guess
that
would be pretty cool.
I think that was the intent of carry optics. It was literally called carry optics.
It wasn't meant
Yeah.
for concealed though. It was the whole premise was that you could. The whole premise of production in carry optics was that you could go into the store,
Mm-hmm.
pick up any modern pistol, right? You know, from whatever major brand, and it was essentially ready out of the box
Yep.
to compete.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to worry about you didn't have to really worry about all this extra stuff, right? Obviously, with carry optics, it was supposed to just be a mirror. I think the original intention was supposed to be a mirror of production, just with a red dot attached onto the slide.
So this interesting because carry optics is still fairly new, right? Like it is the division's maybe 8 years old now at the most. Like from when it was like a proposed
Provisional.
division, provisional. Thank you, up to
Mhm.
where it is now. And at the time it was like peak of like you could actually get a pistol. There were reliable red dots you could put on top of it. There were manufacturers like Canic that were coming right out of the box that you could put a dot on top of, right, and be affordable for an average shooter to shoot. It's a lot of fun because shooting a dot is a lot easier than shooting irons. Let's just be honest.
Yep.
But now there's an issue, I think, where, and kind of what I was asking Tyler about was, if you go to the store now and you
Mhm.
purchase a carry firearm, though the way that looks now is way different than even 8 years ago. Because if
For
you're
sure.
looking at like the X macro, or you're looking at like, I have we lovingly call my PSA dagger the Poor Poet, but I have a Poor Poet Micro that has a compensator built into it, which would put me into open.
Yeah.
So the problem is now that concept, Paul, that you're talking about going into the store, purchasing a gun off the rack and then being able to shoot it and carry optics by putting an optic on it. That's not the case anymore, because you could buy one of those like micro compacts with ported barrel or a compensator or whatever,
Mhm.
and now you are now an open, right?
Hmm.
So I guess does carry optics need to change as a result of it?
Well, the division itself is, I mean, there's some flaws to it in terms of the concept, right? Like you were discussing. The biggest thing I find with carry optics is that when they when they introduced certain rule changes, like adding the extent magazine extensions was a big problem, because the whole point is when they started adding rules that added a perceived uh, quote unquote arms race. That's when carry optics started to not be the right division, or in terms of like the right concept. Um, I will say, like in terms of like competition wise, I think it's all about what actually gives an advantage and what gives a perceived advantage. So I will just straight up, compensators give an advantage. There's 100% an advantage to compensators. Like they work. It's a technology that has been proven time and time again. They work. So if I don't mind if we want to have integrated comps for a separate division. Like if we like, let's say we make a concealed carry division, right? We roll carry optics into maybe we change the name. We make a whole new division. We just destroy carry optics, move it all to limited optics, whatever. And then so we have these because a lot of people are carrying micro compact guns with like 15, 18 round magazines, which is crazy. And they all have either compensators out of the box or integrated comps. I think that's fair, but I'm not going to. I don't want to compete against a guy. I don't want to compete against a guy with a compensator in limited optics. Period. Even if it is a slide ride. Dot. Don't. It's not. It is a competitive advantage in my personal opinion, which is why I think open and limited optics is fine being completely separate.
I mean, you even look at SHOT Show this year. Most of the gun manufacturers came out with, integrated comp and ported barrels on most of their guns. And I think like, especially if somebody buys one of those guns and then comes to shoot for the first time and they don't know the rules to like the letter, they're going to come in and be like, oh, well, I have this gun. And they're like, oh, well, that because it's a compensator and ported, now you're shooting open. Good luck.
Well, but I think that's a completely different thing, though, in terms of like most of the people that when you first come in, walk through a match, and you're getting ready for it. I don't think the division matters. Shoot whatever you want, bring whatever you want. You're not going to win.
Right. But then I think there's the argument of now, like that person that shows up that may be more limited budget, now they want to get into the sport and they can't continue to use the firearm that they have. Because I'll use Tyler as an example. Tyler uses, like you said earlier, he uses the same pistol for everything.
Yep.
Right. Which is great. And I think that's a personality type that like there's some of us that just love multiple guns and get into stuff. And I'm trying to be more like Tyler personally by keeping like a platform like Smith & Wesson, keeping to it and sticking to it. Right. So
It's
the
like
guns all kind
tools,
of feel the
man.
same. Right.
Pick a brand and stick with it. You don't
Yeah,
want to keep
but
switching up batteries.
It used to be that you could roll up at a match and people would roll up with a Glock 19 or a Glock 17, right? Like this old adage. And they would show up and they're like, I have no idea what division I can shoot in. And people would be like, well, you can shoot in 2 divisions, basically. You can either shoot in production or you can shoot in limited if you want more ammo, right? And they're like, okay, cool. Then that immediately that having a Glock 19 or Glock 17 in production, there are definitely guns that are faster in those divisions, but it's not as huge as a disadvantage of shooting a micro 9 in open, right?
Mhm. Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
you could
Yeah.
take that Glock 19 and then down the road, if you want to keep it, get it milled and put an optic on it or buy a new slide or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the purchase cost to go from that like initial division that you started off into like one of the more advanced divisions was a lot less. And I use Tyler as an example of that. And I think when you buy a lot of guns now, they are like the MOS, like the Glock MOS, right? Where they're cut for an optic. So you could choose to start off in production and then move to an optic later if you want to. That's why I always tell people that even if you're not going to shoot an optic to start with, buy one that's cut for it so you have
Oh
the
yeah.
option.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, but I think but to your point, it completely depends on what they want to do. If there's somebody like Tyler who has made mention that, like the classification system and the competing part is kind of like secondary to what he wants to get out of it, which is practice.
Mhm.
I think most people, when we start talking about the conversation of that, it doesn't matter what division they're in. They don't have to, if you're coming in and like it's like, oh, I want to do this. This is like great practice. I love, it's fun to go out once a month and do this. I don't really want to put in this kind of like dedication to like 100% knowing the rules, having this crazy ammo budget and then creating a travel schedule to start shooting major matches. Like, it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, they're competing against themselves.
Yeah.
And that's basically why I started shooting, was to get better at shooting.
Mhm.
And what better way than to do a competition where it's that pressure that you're going to feel and you have to perform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the cost of guns, like, I'm like, I'll be 100% real. Limited optics was just an excuse for me to buy a new gun.
For sure.
Just be
That's
flat
great.
out. Yeah, but single action only is not an advantage. Coming from somebody that, well, yes, I have is a nice tuned Beretta 92 trigger. So it's like a 6-pound double action and like a 3-pound single action trigger. There's absolutely no perceived difference. Like, I think my platypus is like a 2.5-pound trigger. I don't shoot any better with my platypus than I do my Beretta. I don't.
Huh.
But
Thing.
it's a practice thing. Like, if you're a good shooter, you're a good shooter. Like, Nils Jonassen won limited nationals on a 9mm Canic.
Which, for those who don't understand, limited again is major power factor, and 9mm Canic, you're shooting it in minor. So he won with a minor
Mhm.
gun in a division where major is king.
Yes,
Okay,
and
that's
it gets
crazy.
Which is the argument that you get rid of major power factor right there. Nils killed major power factor when he did.
Yeah, and it's a division dominated by $5,000 2011s, shooting 40.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question would be for the group would be then in this case of like, I say you get rid of limited, like we were talking about earlier, Paul, you get rid of production, you combine those down to one, you get rid of all the limited 10 concepts, whatever, blah, blah, blah. If you're in a state that's limited, you can't shoot X amount of rounds, that's fine. Just, every division is 10 rounds, right? Whatever. But then if you look at the way that things are spread now, the vast majority of shooters are in carry optics, right? So I know I talked about earlier about divisional spread, but do you reduce the amount of iron-sighted divisions down to like one division, maybe two? Single stack needs to go away. Single stack, whatever, you're done. Go away. And then like with the optics divisions, I think you're going to need to either like reduce those down to or spread those out. Right. So maybe you do have like a micro 9 division where you're carrying a smaller gun that's ported and compensated, but it can only be so thick. Right. Just because those type of guns tend to tend to really go in that direction for technology. Because I think unfortunately, if we don't address the ported and compensated issue for guns that people are purchasing off the rack for carry guns, the USPSA is going to fall behind. And they've always done a really good job of not falling behind because they've always been on the edge of saying, hey, we're seeing this coming down the road and we see that it's a problem. We need to fix it. right?
Well, yeah, but to that end, I think this is a problem with production. Have a list or have the box. Pick one. Because the fact that production has not only a required production list, like a list of guns that it's only allowed in production, and carry optics too, and then also on top of it have a box is dumb. Theoretically, whatever you buy off that list is approved.
Right.
So why is there a box on top of it? Like, and it's again, there's also the problem in carry optics that they also have 144 whatever 145 millimeter magazines, right? Which is already a deviation to production. But they don't have a box; they just have the list, and I think it works out great. Right? If you want to join that arms race, you want to be on like the full on like my gear isn't completely holding me back. It's great, no box. Mind you, those magazines end up costing you $80 a piece after extensions and springs.
USPSA is interesting because you have a sport that is so dependent on the equipment that you have, right? And I'm going to argue this both directions. So I guess I'll use Tyler as an example again, because I use Tyler as an example. Where you've got people that can spend $10,000 on an open pistol, right? All the way down to people who can buy a Glock MOS with an optic on it. And there's a good chance that you put a good shooter behind that they will outshoot, hands down. Like, they know they'll outshoot a B-class shooter with an open gun, right? So the problem is but it's still very dependent on like the equipment, and the equipment costs are different. And you can't tell somebody that, no, we're only going to allow, like, you can only shoot Glocks in this division, right? Which again goes back to your point about the production list. As long as you're on the production list, you're good to go. Which, I think, what is the rule? Like, you have to sell 500 of those guns or something like that. I forget the production rules.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's tough. It is an arms race, and it's also not an arms race.
Well, I think we're taking it into the direction of making it, we're trying to adhere it to the people that only want to show up at locals once a month and have them be competitive. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think we should be catering to them at all.
I disagree. The top like 2% of shooters, like, they're the ones that are making a lot of these different rules. They're the ones that are saying, well, we got to do this, and this, whatever. And I know we're arguing about today because we're into the hobby, right? We understand. Mm-hmm. But the vast majority of people shooting the sport are not your GMs.
Yeah.
And they don't care about the GMs. Right? Like, they probably, like, half the people that shoot it, but I don't even know who Nils is. Right? Or who JJ Rakaza is.
Yeah. But
I know him.
But to that point, though, okay, I'm so sorry because we're going to go back to you, Tyler. Tyler shoots limited optics only because he wants the magwell.
That's literally it. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
So what does it matter? He would not have cared. I bet you Tyler would not care right now if we took away limited optics completely and was like, okay, if you want to shoot your magwell, like, okay, I'll pose the question, Tyler. If we took out limited optics, would you be okay with keeping your gun the way it is and then plopping you in open?
What's open again?
Race guns.
Oh, no holds barred.
Tyler's playing dumb. He knows what it is.
No holds barred.
Kind of. I mean, if you were to do that, then I'd probably buy a compensator, and then I'd probably just go into open. That's probably what I would do, because I have considered getting a compensator for my carry gun just so I could do it, but I haven't because I don't want to spend the money, and I don't feel like taking it off every time I do USPSA. Because I was doing carry optics originally, but I would have to take my magwell off every time, and it was really annoying to me.
I mean, that's fair.
So, but all that to say, like, I wouldn't really care. So it'd be. I think it'd be annoying, but I'd be like, whatever.
Okay, but it would be more of you're saying it'd be more of an excuse to buy stuff that it would actually be like an actual problem.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Or a care. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Which is fair. I'd use the creation of limited optics to buy a $2,000 gun. So
that's amazing. That's so great.
like I get it. right? Like,
Peer pressure is great.
yeah,
It's that
but like,
government money, man.
but like, it's 100% real. Um, like I think anybody that wanted to just take a Glock 17,
Yep.
wanted to spend a little bit of that extra money on getting extensions for magazines, right? Put the dot and then spend the money, put a dot on it. Could right now compete in limited optics, and if they practiced their ball off and got really, really good, could win in limited optics. I do not think there's any barrier to the firearm at all in terms of that. So I don't think there needs to be this whole thing of like we need to cater to the person that just wants to come once a month, because it completely depends. If they just want to come once a month, then they can just look at the overall list. That's what I did when I first started shooting USPSA. Now that's not great for the mental health sometimes because but like if you really are looking to improve, it's like, okay, how do I really stack up against everybody else?
For
right?
sure.
We got guys at South Kent that shoot open that are near the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
With fully tuned race guns.
That's awkward.
But it happens.
I mean, when I first started out, I didn't even look at I looked at the overall and kind of went, okay, I'm, bottom third, whatever. But then I looked inside my division and went, oh, I'm actually doing pretty good inside my own division.
For sure.
And if you're a good shooter, that's just going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're putting in the work and the time to get better, it's just going to happen. Right? Like, technically, if we really want to go by like the perceived notion of like advantages or whatever, Tyler, you shoot a Glock clone, right? Or is it just a straight Glock? You shoot a Glock clone with a striker fire trigger with no trigger job, and a tiny magwell.
Yep.
If there was a real perceived advantage, you should technically be a worse shooter than me because I have a 2011, I have a single action trigger that's that's all this better, blah 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 blah, with a bigger magwell, all this stuff. But it's not.
So what I'm hearing is one optics division, one iron sight division, one revolver division, and maybe PCC.
And a concealed carry division.
There you go.
I think revolver is interesting, and I think I think the diehards of the sport would have to find a compelling reason to keep it alive.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, that whole generation of revolver shooters is literally dying off.
Yeah.
So the one boomer that listens to this podcast is going to stop listening at this point.
That is just all in Texas, man.
Yeah. I hate
Texas shooters.
Oh, Cowboys.
Yeah. And I think it should be said that I think there's a general like I hate to say it, like I think revolver looks really cool and looks really fun to shoot.
Oh yeah, they're awesome looking.
But the fact that the platform itself, so at one point I did like piece out the cost to get into revolver division. I mean, so let's say I actually wanted to like get a tuned revolver. That was like $2,000 by itself.
Yikes! Wow.
Yeah, you can.
That's why I just borrow other people's guns.
Yeah. but yeah, I mean, like, but yeah, if you want like for yourself, like it's expensive, and like it's to get a 6-pound double action trigger. Like it's
all metal. Like anytime you're throwing a bunch of metal at a problem, like it's going to cost. The spike's going to cost. So I guess my one argument, and kind of ending off this specific divisional conversation, as we reach about an hour of time here, is PCC has a single division with the USPSA. Now, Steel Challenge, there's two. There's irons and optics, but nobody's ever complained about that fact. Nobody's ever asked for, I want a PCC division that has major power factor, or I want a PCC division that allows, a stick to be so long, right? They literally said you can do whatever the heck you want with PCC, and run whatever you want, and it's been fine, and nobody's complained. Now, PCC is not one of the like top shooting divisions. Is probably at this point, 4th or 5th maybe in the amount of people that shoot it. But again, there's a huge difference between like I've shot a CZ Scorpion, which is completely non-competitive in there, but I have an SBR version. It's fun. I've also shot an AR9, but it's not tuned like a lot of people will shoot, and it's fine, right? So I guess that brings the whole argument of maybe you just have one optics division, one PCC division, one irons division, and then maybe a
I think the only problem with that is there is definitely a mechanical advantage when you go into race guns, like
Sure.
fully.
But if you get rid of major power factor, then they're dealing with the same problems that everybody else is dealing
No,
with.
you're just the compensators get smaller. The compensators get a little smaller. 9 major probably ceases to exist. But you people are still hand loading those things, and to get there's probably instead of like a 3-port comp, it's probably like a 2-port comp
Sure.
with some popple hole with maybe a little bit of popple holes, right? To me, what it seems like will happen is that if we only have one optics division, all the guns will turn into basically steel challenge open guns, which are the basically baby versions of open USPSA open.
Mm-hmm.
Which because there is an advantage. I think when you start to get into like for example, like Masterpiece Arms has that really like gigantic mag well that's like machined out perfectly. So like if the mag comes in at like 89 degrees, it'll flip itself and go and slide in.
It's crazy.
It's dope. I mean, I just can't afford one. It's $4,000.
Oh, wow.
That's still less than Infinity, though.
Yeah, well, Infinity's I think when you get an Infinity, it's like you're flexing on the boards.
Yeah,
even more so because like a $4,000
$4,000
competition gun is mid range for a 2011. Like,
I mean,
that's insane.
I've shot, one of the guys that we shoot with. I borrowed his open gun, and I've shot my limited gun, and I'm shooting carry optics, and I can definitely tell. With the open gun, you're just sitting there. You put the dot on the target. You squeeze the trigger twice as fast as you can, and boom, there's two shots right next to one another.
Wow.
There's definitely like an advantage in that aspect.
And the frame mount is huge. The fact that you have all these pieces working together, and as long as you have a good enough grip and have good enough vision, that dot doesn't move. It doesn't. Like maybe like a centimeter to your eyes, a millimeter.
But fine, you can have open. We'll put all the other dot up the slide right. Frame mounted red dot, slide mounted red dot. 2 divisions. That's it. You're done.
And I think, I think it should be addressed though, like because like a lot when I've heard of other like people talk about like condensing the divisions because this is way too many divisions, which I don't disagree with. Like, I do think it does. If we only have like 2 divisions, optics, irons, optics will turn into steel challenge open guns, and irons will become whatever.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. Like again, it's a challenge, and I'm sure like the board members probably lose sleep over this stuff all the time, or they just don't care, one way or another. or manufacturers reach out and say, "Hey, I want to build a gun, but I want people to buy it," and so that shows up on the cover of USPSA magazine.
But we're so niche too. USPSA so niche.
Yeah, I will say we are niche, but then I guess a lot of it does bleed over into IDPA in some perspective, and then which leads over to 2-gun, which leads over to running guns, which leads over to 3-gun. So realistically, you're maybe looking at like 100,000 people in the United States that shoot this stuff. But it's still the case of like only X amount of people are race car drivers, right? Mm-hmm. But when you see that race car on TV, you're like, oh my gosh. Or like, let's say you're watching a Baja and you see like, I'm going to make up like a Ford Bronco, like whipping through the desert or something like that. And you're like, I want that. I want that experience. I want that feel. I want to be cool. Right. I think the same thing applies to pistols as well, too, where they're like, oh, I really want that pistol. I want the staccato because it looks like a 1911 from World War II or whatever. So,
well, and I mean, yes, right now the current trend is 2011s. Staccato has probably sold more pistols these last couple of years than they've ever sold in their lifetime.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and Kyle once took me to a 2-gun match. Peer pressured me into a 2-gun match.
It happens a lot to you,
do a lot of stuff.
Yes, it's a problem. I need to be strong. I need to have a stronger backbone. But so we go to this 2-gun match, right? First time I do, I'm like middle of the pack. Second time, I'm finally like comfortable comfortable shooting a 2-gun match. I place in the top 10 of the shooters. And it's like only like 25, 30 people. But
I was
as
really
someone that
hoping you'd say like 11 people.
I know.
No.
Yeah, top 10.
Yeah.
There's
Look at
11
the
of
scores.
us.
There's 11.
The only people that beat me
hmm
were guys that practiced with their pistol.
Yeah.
And I was shooting at my 92, my Laney 92. Like it's
Yeah.
Like-
It is. I think it's a skills gap. I think is what
Yeah.
you're trying to say, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with Zombie Invitational. We showed up at Zombie Invitational or Wolverine or whatever, and like the people that can shoot pistols, because it's a lot easier to set up challenging shots for pistols, with steel because it's closer, less carrying steel, or blah blah blah, whatever. It's a lot easier to do the pistol, but then it really tilts the competition to pistol because again, like with Zombie, it's pistol rifle one day, pistol shotgun the next day, the same thing every day, or the same equal denominator or whatever I'm trying to say is the pistol both days, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. We are we have gone over an hour. It's crazy. I feel like this time has just blown by. And really I'm trying to get ahead of this because I like to put Tyler on the spot with going to close this puppy out with some advice. Tyler, what do you got for us?
I got a book.
Cheater.
What?
Cheater. You're just like shooting PCC. You're a cheater.
I don't even care. Hey, it's called Using Your Resources. I literally have my books right behind me. So the book that I chose today is from Changes That Heal from Dr. Henry Cloud, which in my personal opinion is probably one of the best self-help books that you can read. So of course, I feel like in 2025 in the 21st century, while we're in the 20s now. So the big thing that I've kind of learned from quote unquote pop psychology is attachment. But back then, when this book was written, it was really more about bonding. So I'm going to kind of reference that, but I guess it's kind of in lieu or addition to what Paul was talking about talking about that backbone. So the 10,000 foot view of Changes That Heal talk about in order for us to heal, in order for us to grow, there are 4 steps that we must take, and in that order, we need to learn how to bond well. We need to learn how to, and once we learn how to bond, that's when we learn how to make boundaries. We can't have boundaries. We can't say this is who we are if we're craving bonding, if we're craving that attention or connectedness. So learn how to bond well. And when you learn how to bond well, you learn how to make boundaries. Once you learn how to make boundaries, you will learn how to integrate the good and the bad, because every person is good and bad, not good or bad. And lastly, once you learn how to integrate the good and bad, that's when you learn how to grow up and be adults and be equals with other adults. Just like, of course, I know Paul might be able to relate with this, of course, coming with our culture, being Asian, white adjacent, or whatever you want to say.
We're gonna get canceled.
I don't even care. So, and actually, please don't cancel us. But
well, I was gonna say Trump's in office now. Nobody's getting canceled anymore.
Exactly. But all that to say, with our culture, it's very much like like it's us and parents. When in reality, it's I'm an adult, my parents are an adult. We are equal. Now, I respect them as my elders, but they are, as a person, we are peers now. So, all that to say, that's my dad advice.
Yeah, and this is not my advice, but I'm gonna comment about that whole peers concept. There comes a point in your life, even for us regular old white people, where you grow up and your parents are always put on a pedestal, right? Because that's just where they are. They're the authority figure, the ones you learn the most from, and at some point you literally leave the nest, right? And then at some point you realize that your parents are also flawed individuals and that they may not be right about everything. And chances are, like, again, the biggest, this is not my dad advice, the biggest thing we always want out of our children is to succeed or to be more successful than we are, right? So in theory, you're going to come at a point where hopefully you are actually better than your parents, right? That sounds weird to say, but maybe from like like perspective of like you're more knowledgeable than them, right? You learn more than them. Not to say that we can't learn from their wisdom going forward, but to your point, Tyler, like you're going to be a peer at some point.
Yes, exactly.
With your parent.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you always respect them and you always take their advice, but the same thing works around, like especially when they ask you to come fix their computer.
Yeah. Did you turn it off and turn it back on again?
Did you reboot your modem?
I know, right? So I do, I guess, to add on to that, I know my mentor, he likes to talk about with parenting, there are like 4 or 5 stages. I can't remember what they are, but of course, stage one is like that infant stage where it's like, or younger toddlers, like, do as I say because I'm your parent. Eventually gets kind of that stage is like, here's why. Then you kind of get to that coaching phase of parenting. And then eventually you get to, okay, they're adults and we're peers now. So it
Yeah.
is a progression.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and it's a weird thing to experience.
It is. So I'm gonna leapfrog. So what about you, Paul? What's your dad advice or advice?
Life advice.
Yeah,
Life advice.
yeah.
Thank you.
My life advice is your thoughts become what you are, what you
Yeah.
think you believe. I oftentimes have to deal with this in my line of work. I have, as a teacher, I have over 200 students I deal with every day.
Oh wow.
And oftentimes, and especially as a music teacher, we are always in a performance-based environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes the idea of perfectionism is very, very closely tied to what we do on a day to day. And I have found that the greatest harm to somebody's performance is negative thoughts and negative imprints. And so if you focus on those negatives, you are not going to be at your best. So always trying to find a way to, find the good in what you've done, especially when you're practicing whatever in your day to day. Today this morning I made coffee for myself. I'm really happy I did that because that's something I've been wanting to change in my routine. That practice session. Oh, I actually found my dot on my draw that time. Even if I didn't make part time. No, I got my dot. That was great. Finding those little points of telling yourself something positive is only going to help you get better, rather than being like, oh, I didn't make part time. That was awful. Or my reload was really, really bad. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's like 20 other things that you probably did right. Right. Oh, that transition was great.
Yeah.
I found the dot. That was fantastic. My follow-up shots were really consistent. Stuff like that. Where I'm not saying that you shouldn't fix the problems. I'm saying is when you're in that routine, finding the things that you can lynch onto to help to improve your own self image.
Yeah. No, that's really important. I know I was reading a book recently called I think it's by Dr. Julie called Why Did No One Tell Me This or something like that. And it really talked about what you're talking about Paul, how for us as human beings it's really easy for us to kind of have that cognitive bias where it's like you have that one bad thing, it's like, oh, it's gonna be one of those days. When in reality, the one amazing thing about the way that our brains work is we have this like type of spotlight. We can shift it instead of trying to focus on that one negative thing. It's like, no, I'm going to move this spotlight to something else and focus on that instead. So you're able to kind of have a better self image. You're able to kind of have better self talk. I know there's definitely the fine line of like, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. Think positive, even though my whole world is falling apart. So I think that's also toxic as well. But it's kind of finding that balance between the two of like being positive but being realistic as well.
I like the comment that you said about putting the spotlight on something else, Tyler, or something else that is going well, because I think that helps you get out of a funk potentially as well too. And we've talked about on the podcast before of the so what now what concept, right? Yep. That's easy to say, but you also have to be able to dig yourself out of the so what part, right? And then get into the now what, the next. And I think focusing on like the good or things that did work out well will help you get out of the funk instead of focusing on the negative, because then your negative thoughts consume you. So even if there's just very minor positive things that you're maybe focusing on, I think it's important to glom onto those things to move forward. And obviously you should always, like, if something negative happened, you're going to deal with it like later, either like subconsciously or like you'll pull it out like when you have a quiet time to think about it and just handle the issue, get rid of it, and then move on. That's good stuff. So all right, Paul, you get to pick who gets to go next.
All right, Tom.
Alrighty. I think my advice is do something that's out of your comfort zone.
Hmm.
Because I feel like the culture nowadays is just, okay, here's my box. I'm going to stay in my
Yeah.
box. I'm not going to go out of my box. And if something tries to get into my box, I'm going to shove that away. And I feel like if you do something out of your comfort zone, you might actually like it. And like, I'm not saying that your comfort zone is bad and you should always be outside your comfort zone, but do something, whatever you think is outside your comfort zone. Go try a new sport, or go try to make make friends with the guy at work that nobody likes. Do something along those lines, just out of your comfort zone.
I think that's great advice, especially for young men of our generation who don't do this well, because there's so many people that get stuck into a routine of, I'm just going to play video games today, or I'm just going to watch TV today. And those things are fine. And Tyler and I talked a little bit about that today. Those things are fine in amounts, but that's your whole persona. How are you ever going to progress yourself forward? Right. And then you're just going to get, again, stuck in a loop, kind of like we were talking about before. So it is pushing those comfort zones that's super important.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's kind of going back into the reference another author, John Eldridge, in his book Wild at Heart. One of the three things that men really crave. The third one is that, well, I guess one of the questions is, do I have what it takes? So there are two questions, but one of the questions is, do I have what it takes? And I feel like a lot of men, especially young men today, are kind of disheartened, and that's why it's so easy to be addicted to video games or entertainment, because it does bring relief. It does, quote unquote, work. It gets kind of that fill of that false sense of achievement, and that's okay to a point. It doesn't help that video games kind of create that buzz, give
Yeah.
you that dopamine dump, give you that intermittent reinforcement. So it's fun, it's nice, you get that dump, but in reality, that's not true. I mean, I guess unless you're part of like the top 0.1%, we're actually making the tons of money doing video games. Like, hey, more power to you, good for you, you know. But that's reality. That's not most of us. But all that to say, I agree with you, Tom. I mean, getting out of your comfort zone. I mean, I look actually just in my background, like right here, this bookshelf. That's the first wood project I made, and that was hard, man. It was a struggle, but I look at it and it's just cool to have. And just Sarah's like, it's got my books, got my plants, and it took me a lot longer than it should have. But you know what? Now I've learned I actually enjoy making stuff.
That's crazy. I'm more nervous about when you water the plants about ruining your books.
Oh, that's what I water my plants at the sink. So
Oh.
yeah, so
That's
this
when he sings. That's when he sings to him too.
yeah, 100%.
Well, as he's watering him.
Oh, totally.
Like Mary Poppins.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all.
Is Mary Poppins cool?
No.
Mary Poppins is the coolest.
No.
I'm
Never
Mary
mind.
Poppins, y'all. he may have been your, what was it? He may have been your dad, but he wasn't your, or he may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy.
Oh gosh.
Rest in peace.
I know, right? All right, Philip. So what about you? What's your dad advice? You had literally three people ahead of you.
Yeah, it's true. No, actually, I actually had it before we started the podcast.
I know you did.
So I did actually.
I bet you forgot it.
No, I didn't. And if you want to keep going, I can keep delaying. But no, my advice is to have controlled passion.
Mm.
So kind of going in line of what like Thomas was talking about, going outside your comfort zone, right, is also that controlled passion. I think once you get outside your comfort zone and then finding yourself, interested in something that's going to progress you as an individual, whether that's something that you're doing that's going to make you physically better or more intelligent or improve a relationship, or whatever it may be, right? Because passion can get out of control. So that's why I say having controlled passion. I think as you just listen to this podcast, you can tell that there's a lot of us that are very passionate about very specific things, right? And it's something that we're invested in, right? Yeah. And my fear too is talking about like a lot of and people always say this about the younger generation, back in my day. But you
what
have
you
this
talking about?
I know you have this fear of the next generation not having that passion to like progress society forward, right? And or progressing like even a sport forward, or like relationships or the way that we improve education, right? Like you think these individuals like, having passion in your job, right? Like how can I make things better, especially for people like Paul who's in education, right? Like how do I have this controlled passion to be able to make my kids better, but then realizing that I'm not going to be able to really reach all of them, right? But you're going to reach some of them, and you have to realize that at some point you can be very passionate about it, but then you may not get like the results that you want. So you have to be able to accept that fact. So all that to say, find a hobby that you like, that's productive, that's social. And again, if your hobby is, watering plants and singing to them at the sink, that's fine too. Because I'd guarantee you there's a whole community around that on Reddit. So
there is Reddit, Facebook, it's all over. Oh yeah,
plants.
I know it's true. I was about to say I just bought a new plant yesterday. It was great, or 2 days ago.
Was it herbology or what is it? Study of
r/her herbology.
I don't even know. There's so many different. There are
r/USPSA.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That is the one amazing thing I feel about us as humans. There are experts in some of the most random things in the world.
Oh yeah.
Like I remember, of course, you got Dr. Pimple Popper, but I think of that like for a while I was going through like this weird phase where I was like watching like these vets just like fixing the hooves of like horses or cows. As all the puzzles. I'm just thinking like, who figured that out? Like we have so many random experts. I mean, we even we hinted about this at the beginning of today's episode with the pigs and the hobby horses. That's just weird. But like they're experts in everything. That's so cool. It's like the animal chiropractor.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up. Like on Instagram, I randomly get those videos where it's like somebody adjusting, and then they're like calming down the dog or whatever, and then they're like pop, and the dog's like, you can't see on audio obviously, but the dog like looks at you with big old eyes, like what just happened in my life here? So the one person in the United States or 2 people in the United States that are animal chiropractors, good on you. You found a niche that I guess was needed. And
I guess.
That's the secret. It's better than spending 4 years or 5 years in a college and getting a degree that's useless.
Like in underwater basket weaving.
Yeah, or
lesbian dance theory.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, even in the music field, there are technically a lot of degrees that are pretty worthless. Like, as far as I understand and know, you do not need a music performance degree to have a job making music classically, even like auditioning for a symphony or whatever. I don't think they look at that degree or need it. So find something that will keep you happy. And make sure that you can live and be happy.
It's fair.
I like that. That's a good way to end. And on that note, live and be happy. Go ahead and live and like and subscribe and comment on the gram of the Instas or shoot us an email with Tyler. What's our email address?
Our email address is acceptableaccuracy@gmail.com.
Yep, and you will find us on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. And I feel like I'm forgetting something else, Tyler. Am I forgetting anything?
Click the notifications bell.
Subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff.
And someone sponsor us because we didn't even bring that up today.
I think somebody said it earlier.
Did we?
I don't think so. All
right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.
And thanks for Paul and Tom for joining us today.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you for having us.